Welcome everyone to another edition of Willow's Weather Briefing. Today is Sunday, May 18th, 2025. Today we start another severe weather sequence directly on the heels of the previous severe weather sequence we had that impacted portions of the Midwest and also Mid-South. We also have flash flooding associated with this system and also heavy snow in the higher elevations around the Rockies. We also have dangerous heat continuing in southern Texas and Florida, building more so in Florida and depleting in Texas. We also have a continuation of that critical fire weather risk in areas such as southeastern Arizona and southern New Mexico. As you can see here on our satellite view, we have the snow associated with our upper level trough over here in the west. We have our subtropical jet coming in to northern Mexico into Texas, causing some these severe thunderstorms already in areas such as the Ozarks and southeast. We also have our low up here in the northeast departing over here. This will cause a marginal flooding risk for far northern New England, but this low will soon be out of the realm of the continental US. Taking a look at our drought monitor here, if you want to know more, just look at this map and look at these lines over here that demarcate the highest impact zones of drought. Here are our current watches and warnings. We have a freeze watch for most of the northern plains up here into the upper Midwest. We also have cold weather over here in the Intermountain West, as well as a winter storm watch here in northern Idaho and western Montana. This is associated, of course, with our upper level trough bringing a lot of cold air to these regions and bringing a lot of forcing as well for snowfall. We also have a broad red flag warning for most of the desert southwest over here in southern New Mexico, eastern Arizona, and far western Texas. Ongoing, we have some severe weather occurring right now in central Arkansas associated with the continual passage of that front that's sort of stalling here. We also have a severe thunderstorm watch for that area as well. Taking a look at our surface map, day one today, we have a swath of severe weather expected in the central to southern plains here, associated with this new low pressure system that's currently forming in the mountains of Colorado. We also have a broad snow risk here along basically the mountainous regions along the continental divide over here because of the cold temperatures and the forcing. Critical fire weather conditions here in southern New Mexico, and also some flash flooding concerns associated with this low pressure system and moisture return as well. Departing occluded low that we saw over here exiting the continental United States. On day two tomorrow, we have a continuation of that critical fire weather risk here, as well as our severe weather risk. It doesn't really change much since our low kind of just meanders a little bit off to the east, but our severe weather risk is still around the same portions, but our dry line is just mixed a little bit east. So broader swath of severe weather expected tomorrow because of the width of the warm sector. The warm sector is very, very wide here, so a lot of real estate for storms to develop and continuing to move forward in. We also have a flash flooding risk tomorrow as well. And finally, on day three, we have that low pressure system continuing to move east, continuing to influence convective weather here. Broad, severe thunderstorms possible around the Midwest, Ohio River Valley, down towards the southeast. We also have flash flooding possible in around the same regions as well. Here's our excessive rainfall outlook. Day one, slight risk over areas of the Central Plains over to the Ozarks region. We expect some areas with slight risk to see about 3 to 5 inches of rain today. Day two tomorrow, slight risk pretty much over similar areas, but migrating a little bit east towards the mid-Mississippi River Valley and portions of the Ohio River Valley all the way down to portions of ArkLaTex. Training storms will continue to bring heavy rainfall, and the Weather Prediction Center is considering a moderate risk either in the region down here near ArkLaTex because of increased precipitable water values and the possibility of training storms associated with that front over here, and also along the warm front up towards north. That's also another regime that the WPC is taking a close eye on in case any training storms happen along the warm front up here. Day 3, slight risk moves east associated with that eastward movement of that low pressure system, primarily for areas of the Midwest, Ohio River Valley, and portions of the Mid-South. The areas of most concern here are portions of the Mid-South over here, mainly due to higher confidence of training storms in this area. Day 4, marginal risk over the Northeast. Again, because that low pressure system is just going to continue moving to the east, and again on Thursday, marginal risk over New England. Here's our fire weather outlook. Critical fire weather risk over southern New Mexico and far western Texas. Day 2, around the same, a bit more consolidated around very certain portions of southern New Mexico and western Texas. And also we have a day 3 fire weather risk pretty much for the same area as tomorrow's fire weather risk. Here is our convective outlooks, very active pattern upcoming. We have a enhanced risk in and just around the surface low in western Nebraska and far northeast Colorado. We also have an enhanced risk across portions of the central to southern plains over here. This is primarily for hail. We have a 30 hatched here in southwest Nebraska and northeast Colorado. We also have a big 30% hatched in the enhanced region, the central to southern plains as well. We also have a tornado risk, a 10 hatched for areas such as central Kansas and also north central Oklahoma. Cities like Wichita, Enid, Salina, Hutchinson should be weather aware because the tornado risk actually looks pretty concerning for tomorrow, even though spatial coverage does not look like that much. So that's why the SPC has a 10%, but tornadoes could be pretty strong tomorrow based on what I've seen in the kinematic profiles. Tomorrow's convective outlook looks to be moving a bit east associated with the mixing of that dry line a bit eastward. We have an enhanced risk over portions of the central to southern plains over to the Ozarks region, primarily for tornadoes here. We have a 10 hatched all over this enhanced risk region, and also a hail risk 30 hatched over these regions as well. We also have a 30% wind risk over here, but it is not hatched, so we expect hail and tornadoes to be the main threat for tomorrow in these regions, such as Dallas-Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Tulsa, up to areas like Springfield, Missouri, and Wichita, Kansas, up to Kansas City. Finally, our day 3 severe thunderstorm outlook, we have an enhanced risk over here in portions of the southeast. Primarily, I believe, it still needs to be worked up, but our primary hazards are probably expected to be tornadoes and wind for this event. A broad slight risk encompasses most of the Ohio River Valley as well as portions of the Mississippi River Valleys over here. Areas such as Nashville, Tennessee, Huntsville, Alabama, Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Jackson, Tennessee, and Decatur, Alabama are all in this enhanced risk. And nothing so far with our day 4 through 8 predictability is just too low, but our pattern looks to be calming down just a little bit, so we should see a depletion of severe weather risks later this week. Here's our heat risk, continued heat building in southern Texas, but depleting by midweek, and heat building across the Gulf Coast and into Florida. We expect record heat values in southern Texas, as well as record heat values in Florida as well. This will continue until around midweek, where we'll see a depletion of heat, at least in southern Texas, but heat in Florida will persist at least just a little bit longer. So if we take a look at some actual values, let's just take a look at San Antonio's heat. Approaching 100 degrees in San Antonio here, but that will of course deplete towards midweek with temperatures just in the mid 90s. Farther southwest into southern Texas towards the Rio Grande, temperatures well above 100 degrees over until midweek, where we'll finally see highs less than 100 degrees. Now over here in Florida, let's take a look at a place like Orlando. Highs in the upper 70s, which is above average for this time of year and could reach record values. So yeah, the heat risk is definitely prominent in areas such as southern Texas and Florida. So let's go ahead and take a look at our models. Let's just take a broad look first at our upper level winds. We have this upper level trough starting to dig into the west, and this will be our main weather maker for today. This trough will make its way eastward, start to impinge on the Rockies, and giving us a low level response. Right now, the low pressure system isn't really consolidated just yet because simply this jet isn't really impinging on the Rockies just yet, which gives us what we call lee cyclogenesis off the Rockies. That will eject off, and then another trough, another short wave across this broad perturbation feature will rotate around and then start to bring in enhanced flow over the central to southern plains over to the Ozarks for a day 2 enhanced risk tomorrow. This trough will move to the east and start to impinge on our risk regions on Tuesday further east. So this trough will just slowly kind of deplete over time and bring more zonal, more east to west or west to east flow over these areas. And then we set up for ridging in the western United States, which will bring above average temperatures for portions of the southwest as well. We could see record highs in areas such as Southern California midweek. All right, so taking a look at our lower levels here, looking at a precipitation type and low pressure systems. We can see a broad low pressure system associated with that troughing currently, but that low pressure system is really going to consolidate around eastern Colorado and bring us our severe weather for today. That low pressure system will meander off to the east, but consolidate again over the eastern Rockies with that second trough that's sort of rounding the base of the larger long wave trough. So another day of severe weather tomorrow. Surface low will finally start to move northeast with the translation of that wave to the east, kind of following that, and you will see continual severe weather in the southeast towards the mid-south. That low will continue to move off to the east and cause possibly some severe weather on the eastern coast, but we're currently unsure on exactly how intense these storms will be. So that's why the SPC has opted to not put out a severe weather outlook for the East Coast just yet. Then high pressure will build in later this week, bringing in warm and fair conditions throughout much of the central United States. Let's go ahead and focus in on today's risk over here in the central US. So here's the ARRR run. Let's go ahead and start with our dew points. Warm sector going to advect north with the consolidation of that surface low. Sort of going to be just-in-time moisture for areas in central Kansas, but fair warm sector over here, not too broad, kind of cuts off in these regions due to the passing of that cold front over here. So a little bit more limited a warm sector regime for thunderstorm longevity over here, but still nonetheless 70s dew points progged by the ARRR at least to be in southern and central Kansas by later today. Let's go ahead and look at some of our severe weather parameters here. Let's look at our mixed layer cape. This is my favorite type of instability to look at. And as you can see here, large instability values throughout central Oklahoma and southern Kansas, up towards 4,500 joules per kilogram over here. So storms will initially form off this dry line over here in western Oklahoma and western Kansas, and also that risk in Nebraska associated with greater forcing over here. Still sufficient instability to cause some severe weather there, but the longevity is really limited as we get that pinching off of the warm sector up here. But down here, pretty extreme instability values progged on the ARRR. Go ahead and look at our bulk shear values here. Impingement of the jet will of course cause high bulk shear values, especially areas further north. We have upwards of 80 knots associated with the impingement of that jet, and also increased surface flow because it's just closer to the surface low. And we'll see a lot of bulk shear values up there, and also sufficient bulk shear values down here towards the central to southern plains with 40 plus knots flow reaching upwards of 50-60 knots across this area. Looking at our low-level storm relative felicity, good ingredient for tornadoes. We have initially not too much storm relative felicity to work with, but as we move on, we have this warm front right here causing some increased storm relative felicity. So any storms that kind of form on the warm front, if they can remain discrete, is something to watch at least early on into the time frame of this event. Here's 21Z 4 p.m. If storms form in Kansas around this time, it could remain discrete for a little bit and sort of tap into that warm front, increasing your shear in these areas. So definitely watching at least early on into the risk. This particular area in Kansas, I believe the highest threat for tornadoes is going to be around here, and at least early on in the risk regime. But slowly, as we get that nocturnal low-level jet response, the tornado risk will become way more widespread, possibly due to the upscale growth that's progged right now in central Kansas. The tornado threat will migrate down toward these southern regimes of the risk area. So let's go ahead and take a look at let's just go ahead and take a look at some soundings. So let's just prog reflectivity so that we don't accidentally bump into any storms. Here's some upscale growth in Kansas pretty early. We can see that we still have some wonky inversion type stuff going on here in the ARRR, but look at that hodograph. Big curvature in the low levels, upwards of 200 surface to 1 kilometer shear, upwards of 450 surface to 3 kilometer shear. Very good for tornado potential in this area. Our low level instability is pretty meager though. Perhaps that is just an ARRR quirk, but nonetheless, still pretty conducive for a hazard like tornadoes. And even regardless, a very good profile for large hail. We got a big straight hodograph, at least in the upper levels, but that low level shear might mitigate some some residence time for hail to grow. But if our low-level instability remains low, that could possibly signal a big hail threat. But overall, this is generally conducive to all severe weather hazards. Go ahead and move forward. This model run actually does not show any development across central Oklahoma. Let's see why that's the case. Pretty odd that we don't see development over central Oklahoma if this is your environment. I mean, our LFC is pretty low. We have a very stout dry line, even as some semblance of a dry line bulge in this area, yet we see no initiation. Kind of odd, but nonetheless, we see a very decent photograph, big shear values over 100 SRH, long photographs as well for big hail. Though we do see a bit higher low-level instability values, which could also increase your tornado threat, but decrease your hail threat. However, something that we also look at, generally speaking, if your storm relative inflow, which is basically your right motion towards your surface wind vector, is low, that it will allow for higher low-level instability values. So this is generally conducive for large hail and tornadoes. So all hazards threat down here. Again, kind of odd that the HRRR doesn't really initiate storms here if that's our environment. And further down south into Texas, northern Texas here, you can see possibly some residual capping up here. Not too much low-level instability, but still sufficient photographs for hazard like tornadoes. So one thing that we look at to try and diagnose storm mode is your bulk shear vectors relative to your boundary. So if you have your boundary over here, our dry line, and let's carefully translate that with the bulk shear vectors. Go to 22Z. And as you can see here, our bulk shear vectors primarily off the boundary throughout the area, which, you know, is usually good if you have strong forcing. With the dry line, it's a bit subtler forcing, and it's a circulation that brings vertical motion on the moist side of the boundary. So if cells decide to what we call detrain off the boundary too fast, then cells will not become robust enough to really sustain themselves. So they'll just kind of form on the boundary and then move off and quickly deplete because they cannot sustain themselves for an extended period of time. So detrainment is definitely a possibility, especially in areas that have less bulk shear values, such as Oklahoma, but nonetheless, still good signs for a more discrete storm mode. All right, let's just take a quick look at the NAM. Moisture return on the NAM, a little bit more meager and pinched off. Well, actually, I'm going a bit too far here. Still good warm sector here, but the transport of those 70s dew points is limited to Oklahoma on the NAM. Look at our not most unstable cape. Let's look at our mixed layer cape here. A bit higher on the NAM, at least in portions of central to southern Oklahoma up towards Texas, but not as much widespread cape values on the NAM over here. The level storm relative helicity, pretty much the same gist as the HRRR. We do see higher storm relative helicity values up here towards the surface low, which is what you'd kind of expect in these areas with the more backed surface winds and closer to the low pressure system. But nonetheless, higher shear values initially along that warm front in Kansas, and increase in shears that we get that nocturnal low-level jets response. Of course, take a few soundings on the NAM. convection kind of just pops up and disappears on the NAM, which is a bit odd to me. But let's just go ahead and take a look at a few soundings. Let's take a look at one up here in the northern regime. A bit wonky. Let's just make sure that we get it right this time. Because I know yesterday we had some problems with getting a good sounding up here. Let's just take it around this area. Alright, fair. We have some capping issues, but forcing is very strong. So we'll have no problem forcing up some storms around here. But look at that. Low-level hodograph, very good shear values conducive for tornadoes as well. And also 60s dew points in these higher elevations of the high plains. They are very good for a hazard like tornadoes. Definitely watch out over there. Let's go ahead and go back to our reflectivity since we're going towards the open warm sector. Go ahead and look at 22Z around central Kansas. Again, NAM is being a bit wonky today. I don't know what's going on there. But seems like we are actually north of the warm fronts on that sounding. So let's just try to get south of the warm front. That might be convection there. Or not. I mean, temperatures are a bit cool. Dew points are a bit warm, so I mean the NAM's kind of out to lunch here. I don't really trust it at all, so we're just gonna move on. Let's go ahead and move on to our other days ahead. We're going to be using, let's just look at the regular NAM for now. You can see that broad warm sector today. And tomorrow we see a reinvigoration of that warm sector, much more broad warm sector over here extending towards the Mississippi River Valley. So that's why our risk is a bit more expansive over here. I'm not going to take any soundings or anything, but we're definitely going to digest this tomorrow as we go forward. Mixed layer Cape values, again, on the very high side. Tomorrow, upwards of 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram across this area. Bulk shear values are going to be, again, high based on the movement of that jet, upwards of 50 plus knots of bulk shear values in this regime. Low-level storm relative helicity, again, high across an expansive area across here, especially as we go towards the low-level jet time at around 3Z, 10 p.m. And also, let's go ahead and move forward towards Tuesday over here. Low-level storm relative helicity, not too impressive of a response on the NAM just yet, but take model runs like the NAM with a grain of salt at this range. Let's go ahead and look at mixed layer Cape. Not too much, kind of confined a bit to areas of the southeast US, which is probably why we have the enhanced risk. We have more confidence in severe weather in this area than anywhere else, really. Let's move on to the GFS, see if it says anything different. We only have surface-based Cape, so let's just go ahead and look at that instead. On Tuesday, kind of similar, but the GFS shows a much broader warm sector in this region, which I think is a bit more realistic than the NAM. I think the NAM's just generally out to lunch, both the high resolution and lower resolution models. Bulk shear values, again, impinging into the area. Upwards of 50 plus knots of bulk shear, especially in that enhanced risk region, down towards the mid-south and southeast. Let's look at our 0 to 3 kilometers storm relative helicity, see if this says anything much differently. More widespread, but around similar values around here, so I think your main hazard will probably be all hazards, but potentially less significant than upcoming than these next 2 days, but today and tomorrow. But we still have a lot of things to resolve in terms of this risk. Now, this is something that I haven't really shown yet in a briefing, but here is our href model, which is an ensemble of high-resolution convective alignment models. So these are pretty good short-term models to use in terms of looking at where storms will initiate and looking at the mean convective environment. So as you can see here, you see storms initially firing off early on in areas such as northeastern Colorado up here, but also storms fire pretty early on in regimes like Kansas. So some models depict pretty fast upscale growth in Kansas, but some of them depict more discrete development. So we'll see. Let's just say that we got rid of the models that typically induce upscale development, like the FV3. So, and I think I'll just get rid of the NAM nest as well, because that hasn't really been too reliable. But as you can see, I think we will expect some discrete development in Kansas, possibly towards northern Oklahoma. We also have development along northern Texas, but there is a gap here in southern Oklahoma, probably by most models. So we either won't, probably won't see development along here. This might be due to some capping issues or something. I'm not really entirely sure, but looking less likely for spatial coverage down here in southern Oklahoma. Let's move on to our 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. Below average for most of the eastern United States, above average for the western United States. This 10-day precipitation outlook, much below average for the western United States and above average for the southern United States. That is going to be it for today's weather briefing. Please be prepared of this upcoming severe weather sequence. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, give any constructive criticism down below in the comments, and subscribe if you want to hear more weather briefings in the future. And of course, if you want any specific information regarding your area, please refer to your local broadcast or National Weather Service meteorologists. Thank you, and have a great day.